Hi, everybody. Woo, this is loud. I have to use this so that we are recording this presentation for all those people who obviously missed out tonight. I'm Susu Duga. I am the co-chair and the programming chair of PIN. We have other members here in our PIN board: Olga, Lena, Bobby, Shari, Janice, and we're just parents who love kids and love families and love to be proactive. So thank you for being here. We have a great presentation tonight. Our speaker, Janine Halloran, I discovered when I was doing some research trying to find something about frustration tolerance, increasing frustration tolerance. I don't know about you, but even in my house with my husband or my adult kids who are in their 20s, we have frustration levels that reach this amount, and I keep thinking, you don't really need to get frustrated at this level. You should be able to hold on and get frustrated for something bigger. And I couldn't find anybody who addressed frustration tolerance. And I thought, what a great thing that would be for our kids to learn how to keep things at a low simmer or even lower before they flip the switch and get really frustrated. And lo and behold, I found Janine. And I got all excited, and then I saw she was from the Boston area. And I thought, oh, yo. But I reached out to her, and she said, sure. And I said, and bring your sister or your friend or your husband and make it a whole fun time. And so she brought Zach, her husband, who has been helping with technology. And we've just had a great time for the last few days. So Janine comes to us bringing Coping Skills for Kids workbook, and then after that was such a hit and people said, okay, my kids are growing up, now they're teenagers. She made one for teenagers too. So Janine lives in the Boston, Massachusetts area with her hubby, her two kids, 8th and 10th grade, and a dog named Gus. And she is an author of not just workbooks, but some really cool cards that are very usable, and they work right into your family and kids' needs. Her work has been featured in Huffington Post, the Boston Globe, CNN, and Psych Central. And she has been a counselor for over 20 years working with kids and sometimes their families. So hopefully all of you have a notepad, something to write with, and Janine will give us some tools for our toolkit. So take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. And Susu is the best hostess. Let me tell you, it's been phenomenal for my first longer trip to Colorado. So when we lived in California for 1 year, one glorious, lovely sun and rain-filled year, actually. And we drove cross-country, and we stayed one night in Boulder, Colorado. And what do I remember? The hotel. And being a little bit out of breath walking down the sidewalk. So that is my experience of Colorado before today. So, or before this weekend. So it's been lovely. It's been absolutely lovely. And I'm thankful to my in-laws who are watching our children. So it makes it easier for us to both be here. That is a blessing. So I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be talking to you about coping strategies for frustration and challenges. And so that's really where I talk a lot about coping skills, and I talk about, coping for anxiety, coping, if you might be struggling with ADHD, might be struggling with anger, but I really like Susu's challenge of frustration. So I really wanted to try and dig in and figure out some strategies and point to some strategies that really are focused on helping kids with frustration. And so one thing I always like to do is be experiential. I've done a lot of talks, a lot of different places, and I always start with a deep breath. So put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And let's take a few deep breaths, slowly at your own pace. Open your eyes when you feel ready. Excellent. Isn't that fun how it shifts the energy in the room? Just a few deep breaths. And I love being able to do that. I talk to teachers a lot, and I say that's something you can do just at the beginning of your school day as a transition. I talk with parents and families, and I say that's something you can do. You know, sometimes I do that when my kids come off the bus when they were younger. That's what we would do. They're teenagers now, so a little bit different coming in off the school bus. Lots of oh my gosh, I forgot the bus driver's name. Oh, Miss Pam. Miss Pam is a riot, y'all. Miss Pam does some stuff on the bus, and I'm like, oh gosh, Miss Pam, I'm not sure. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I don't know if they have those here in Colorado. Every state is different. So sometimes they have like a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist. It's along those sorts of lines. And I spent a lot of time in school. So I worked in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. I actually really liked middle school. People either love middle school or hate middle school. I thought it was hilarious. It was so fun, so awkward. Oh my goodness, but such drama every day. Like it was never dull. It was never dull. So I really appreciated that, right? And I worked in a lot of different types of settings in schools as well. So I worked in substantially separate, so kids who weren't actually in their home district, they had some challenges and they needed to be schooled in someplace else. So I worked with those kids as the individual counselor. And the group counselor, so I would, in crisis management. That was a lot of my job actually there. In a school, I also worked in a substantially separate classroom as the school counselor. And then I was a school counselor for a typical school setting. So I had, 200 7th and 8th grader. So I was in charge of 7th grade. So I had 200 7th graders. And then I had a 4th and 5th grade school, and that was about 400 kids. So that was excessive, but fun. The kids were fun. We had a great time. And I've also done work in private practice. And I've worked in mental health clinics, social skills clinics. I actually used to run a summer program for kids on the spectrum, kids with ADHD, kids who were just having a hard time making friends. And that was really fun. We played a lot of Pokemon. We played a lot of Minecraft. Oh my gosh. Kids would build me things in Minecraft. I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. But that looks lovely, and I'm so glad you're sharing it with me. So in addition to that, I also run Coping Skills for Kids, as Susu was mentioning. I wrote the Coping Skills for Kids workbook, I think before we moved to California. Yep. And then I wrote Coping Skills for Teens, and it launched the week of lockdown. So what can you do? That's when it was going. That's when it was going live. So I just rolled with it. That's a lot of the time that I spend now is working on Coping Skills for Kids, but I still do see private clients. So I have clients that range from 7 years old to a junior. I can't believe I'm saying this, a junior in college. So it's really fun to be able to work with kids, and it keeps me fresh. And it makes it so that I find, they're always challenging me. I really appreciate that. But then not only am I a professional, I'm also a mom. I'm a mom who lived through COVID, y'all. I went to 4th grade. It was rough. So we raised kids in a pandemic. I live the stuff that I talk about. So I know what it's like to be in the trenches and have kids who are struggling, to have no idea what you necessarily need to do, to be overwhelmed, and it's okay. And just to be able to know and understand, what are the strategies I can use? What are things that I can do that can make the situation better? So it's lovely to have a great partner who is along with me and doing those things together with me. So, and it's, we have a good time as a family. We talk a lot about strategies that we can use. I don't always say overtly coping skills, but we do talk about, when you're getting mad at the video game, let's take a break. Let's do something else. Let's go for a walk. And what's really neat is that we've seen some growth in the fact that our kids will use their strategies, which is really neat to see. Like, you could see, I'm getting so frustrated. I'm going to leave the room and I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go for a walk in the neighborhood. It's lovely when that happens. It really, really is. So I've told you a little bit about me, but I want to know who you are. I talk to a lot of ranges of families, and so I want to know, how many of you have preschoolers? No preschoolers in the room. Cool. Elementary school. Okay. Middle school. I'm so sorry. I'm right here with you. 8th grader. I got an 8th grader. And high school. Okay. So I'm going to do elementary, middle, and high. Excellent. Thank you so much. And that is wonderful. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is really try and make this as practical as possible for you. So in front of you, hopefully, you got a little index card when you came in. So what I would love for you to do is take a moment and write on that index card, what is one challenge that you are dealing with your child or teen? One challenge that they're experiencing. I know you've got multiple, but think of the highest level one. What's the one that bubbles to the top for you all the time? If you need multiple pieces of paper, I completely understand, and you can do more than one piece of paper for if you have more than one child. Totally understandable. You got 2 different babies, right? Or at least we did. We had 2 very different babies. I think I was telling Susu this story. We had our first baby, and we thought we had it down, right? She loved to get swaddled. She loved to ride in the car. She loved to swing in the little baby swing. Our second was he fought out of the swaddle at 2 days old. He kicked himself right out of it. And he hated the car and hated being swung. He just wanted me. And so kids are different, and you have to sort of learn who they are and understand that and figure out what's going to work for them. Okay, I'm sure you have a lot of stuff. Does anybody feel brave enough to share? Oh, I love it. I'm walking over. Do you want me to stay back there? Sorry. Audience participation, y'all.
So she gets very nervous. Oh, she gets very nervous about stuff. And especially the last few months, this crazy weather that we have, she's like, is it going to thunder? Is it going to rain? Is it windy? Is it... So she'll constantly be checking on the weather app.
So a lot of weather anxiety, which I understand to a point, but it gets to a point where it's debilitating, right? She's constantly checking. She's constantly not able to get past it. And how do you live with the uncertainty? That's hard. You have to practice that, living with uncertainty. And what do you do with it? Anybody else want to share something that they are dealing with? Great. I'm going to come over to you.
Getting homework done and not turning it in, saying that they are going to be a sports kid and that's what they're going to do with their life and school doesn't matter.
Excellent. So they do. So you're telling me they do it and they just don't hit turn in?
50-50. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't.
But they're sports kid for life?
That's what they want to do when they grow up, and so school doesn't matter, and I shouldn't be bothered with homework.
Okay. I dealt with that a lot in one of my districts. It was all the time, you can't all be NBA stars, y'all. You can't. It's going to happen. What happens if you get injured? What happens when your career is over? Fine, let's go with it. If you're in there, you're 30, right? What do you do then? What's your plan? How are you going to spend your time? Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to share the things that they are seeing with their kids?
Well, I just saw the topic, and that is what we're dealing with. It's just easily frustrated. Just any little thing just blows up, and how to make it not a big deal.
Right, like it's size of the problem. Like, yeah, like you are having a 5 reaction to a 1 problem. What is up? Somebody else over here? Yeah.
I was just going to say that she really gets frustrated that she has to listen to us.
Don't they? It's really frustrating to listen to us. And I know. Sometimes it's teenage brains, y'all. Teenage brains. Oh, did you want? No? It's okay, Lindsay. I'm sorry. I'll walk away.
Doesn't take responsibility for their part in anything. It's everyone else's fault.
Oh, we have hit the nail on the head. That is a problem. Everybody else, where is your locus of control? It's not mine, is it? It's not my life, it's your life. You have to take responsibility for your actions. I already did 8th grade. That's actually what I said a lot in elementary school. I'm like, I did 5th grade. It's not my job. Nope. I'm not going to do it for you. It's not happening. You can talk to your teacher about why you didn't do it. I go on. I have this problem. I really like stock images. I don't know why they make me chuckle. So I tried to find funny ones of kids having frustration. And the one with the kids in the back seat, oh, that brings me back, y'all. My kids are bigger now, so they're not into that. But it's they're listening to things. They're not talking to me or each other. It's fine. Developmentally appropriate, but it's all right. So, the things that you're talking about are the things that they're getting frustrated, that we are seeing. We're seeing that they're frustrated with their schoolwork. They're not turning things in. They're hearing no, or hearing you can't do that, or, just having boundaries and saying no to something, not getting what they'd like. Those are things that are happening. And friendship stuff can also be a little bit frustrating, especially that relational aggression, bullying. It can be really challenging. So I want you to know I'm going to try and help you come up with some ideas and some strategies that you can use, and that can be helpful. But what I'd like to do is just start with a couple of ground just some baseline information. So brain growth, let's take a moment and talk about that, okay? So I always talk about the toddler brain and the teenage brain. They are basically the same, okay? I know that my teenagers hate when I say that, but I don't ever say that to my teenagers, my teenage clients, but I'll say it to my elementary school kids. But what happens is the toddler brain and the teenage brain, they're going through incredible growth, right? So they are developing new strategies all the time. They're developing problem-solving skills. Do you know when they were little and they would wake up and they'd know several more words and they'd be able to do something that they weren't able to do the day before, right? That's a toddler brain. Fits in spurts, great leaps and bounds, and then suddenly you're but what happened then suddenly they can't manage it, right? And they're having a tantrum. Same with teenagers, just looks a little different because they're bigger. So their brains are growing at an astronomical amount as well, but it's inconsistent. So they will, one day they're I'm going to solve this problem with my friend, I figured it out. And the next day they're crying over something and you're I don't understand what happened. The peanut butter just fell. But that's their brain. The thing about elementary school is brain development is always a little bit, it's not consistent, but it's more consistent in elementary school. So it's more linear. It's a little bit easier. There's not as much inconsistency as there is so much with the toddler and the teenage brain. So it is developmentally appropriate. It does not mean it is easy as the adults. That is what I talk about. It's really hard. The other thing I like to bring up is the work of, I believe this is Dr. Dan Siegel, and he talks about the window of tolerance. So there is an area when kids are in that optimal functioning, they're in the rainbow. This lovely woman, Lindsay Brahman, she's a counselor too, and she does these illustrations on Instagram displaying all these like really challenging topics or complicated topics in these like beautiful artwork forms. And I had to share this one with you, obviously with her permission, but it's really cool to see the work that she does. So she, based on psychological information that we have and studies that have been done. So he talks about this optimal window of functioning. So that rainbow, that's where growth happens. That's where learning happens. That's the best time to be teaching strategies, not only for learning like things at school, but also learning coping skills, right? When they're getting close to the rain clouds, that's where you have to be careful, because that's a great time for them to try a strategy before they get to the rain clouds and are shut down or explosive, right? We don't want to see those sorts of things happen. It happens because they're human, and that is okay. But we want to hopefully try and help them get out of that, taking a break, and doing some other strategies that can help them get out of that extreme sort of ends of the rainbow here and get back until that optimal functioning, because that is when learning can happen. When they are extremely distressed, they cannot hear what you're saying. Like, you can talk to them about consequences. I actually just had this conversation with the family. You can try to talk to them about consequences. They can't hear you, and it's not going in. At that point, it is just crisis management. You are trying to make it so that you can get through this and then have an opportunity later to debrief, to talk about what could be different the next time. But that's not the time to intervene. You got to wait until they're either in that be careful or in the optimal functioning. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So let me show you the map for the day. So this is what I'd like to walk you through, because I think this is what I talk about when I talk to kids about coping skills, and when I talk with them about how I want them to be able to manage themselves. These are the steps I want them to take. I want them to first be able to label the feeling, because labeling the feeling makes it easier to manage. Self-regulation is huge, and one step to self-regulation is being able to label your feeling. The next thing I want them to do is step 2. I want them to try a coping skill. And I know that can be a little bit challenging, especially for our teens, but I have some ideas for you. So I want them to try something. And then I want them to go to step 3, and I want to, after something has happened, I want to take a moment to debrief. I want to go and check in with them after things are calm, when things are chilled out, later, like if an incident happened earlier, like maybe around dinner, maybe we talk at bedtime. If something happened later in the day, maybe we talk the next day after school. I want to go back and talk about what worked and what didn't work, and what can we do the next time. So we can continue to go through this plan to help them figure out what are those strategies that they can use, what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Because really, what we want them to do is own it themselves. I don't want to have to tell my child how to cope. I want them to be able to cope on their own. That's our goal. We want them to launch and leave the nest. That's our entire launch and be a good person who can manage your emotions in the world. Like basic of things that we want them to be able to do. And one of the things I like to be able to help kids do is to go through this and talk through like what worked, what didn't, what can I do differently next time. So let's take step 1. We're going to dig in a little bit more. So identify and label the feeling. So I have a particular kid. I have a couple of kids right now. They're having some really big feelings, y'all. Like really big feelings, right? And so one thing I always talk with them about is it's okay to feel anything. Every feeling is okay. And I know that's it was weird for me, like as a therapist coming to that, like anger is okay. Anger is a sign. Anger is not a bad thing. It's okay for them to be angry, but how you react when you're angry, that is what you have to be paying attention to. You want to make sure that you are keeping your own body safe. You're keeping other people safe, and you're keeping all of the things that are around you, walls, desks, tables, books, state testing. I had a kid rip up state testing once. It wasn't pretty. You want to keep those things safe. And so you want them to be able to know it's okay to be angry. It's actually in the Coping Skills for Teens workbook, I talk about channeling your anger in a positive way. You can be really angry. A lot of stuff changes because people get angry and they decide they want to do something about it. That's a good thing. When you get really fired up about something and you decide, I'm going to change something that I'm doing or something that is happening because it's making me real mad, that's power. That's making a positive effort and doing something in a good way. And you got there because you were angry. So anger isn't bad. So sometimes it's really refreshing to actually see kids' faces when I say this to them. They're like, it's okay for me to be angry, Janine? I'm like, yeah. You can be full of rage. It's fine. I know you are. It's fine for you to do that. It's not okay for you to hit anybody. It's not okay for you to throw things. It's not okay for you to knock things over. It is okay for you to be angry and to be able to talk about that. So I like to just start with the feelings rules for kids. And then name it to tame it. So this is also Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. They've done a lot of work. I think they wrote The Whole Brain Child. Wonderful, wonderful book if you want to understand a little bit more about strategies and overall thinking about how kids' brains work and how you can help sort of align their brains to develop well. But one thing that they talk about is this idea of being able to name it and then making it easier to tame it. So if you are able to say your emotion, if you're able to say, I'm mad, I'm worried, I'm anxious, I'm scared, automatically saying it's kind of shocking because it's such a simple intervention, but it makes it easier for them to manage their emotions. It makes it easier to self-regulate when you can say it out loud. And I have seen it time and time again. A kid will come into the office, I'm mad, Mrs. Haller, and I'm really mad. And then we take a moment and we sit down and we're gonna talk about it. And just being able to say it and being allowed to say it is huge for kids. So I love to be able to talk about helping them say it, to learn the language. And I start when kids are little. So I don't have any preschool kids right now and no super duper early elementary kids. But I often will say to parents, when you read books, if you're reading to your kid at night and a character is having an emotion, don't let the pigeon drive the bus. Who knows Mo Willems? Yeah, that pigeon has a lot of big feelings, a lot of big feelings. So you could talk about that. And I talk about that. And I've actually done that in therapy with kids. Because it's funny, because Mo Willems is funny, right? But then the pigeon is really mad. So we could talk about the pigeon being mad. So I say, you read books and you identify the feelings that the characters are having. You can watch TV shows and talk about the people and how they are feeling. So for a while ago when I worked at I did that summer program, we watched a lot of Harry Potter because they were super into it, and I was too, so here we are. And we talked about, all the dynamics of friendship and being left out, and how did that feel? And thinking about, especially in the first movie, Hermione, how did that feel for her to feel left out? And what does that mean? And have you ever felt that way? So I like to introduce it and make it part of your everyday language. And then I also narrate myself, and I tell parents to do this too. I narrate my feelings in an age-appropriate way. I'm really excited because this happened. I'm a little bit frustrated because I'm sitting in traffic. I'm a little bit sad today because this happened. But being able to let them know adults have feelings, you have feelings, doing a check-in, to be able to talk about and be able to label those feelings. So I do a check-in all the time, even something as simple as thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down, or roses and thorns, just to be able, where roses are good things that happened in your day. And thorns are things that are like struggles for you, something that did not go well, something that like maybe bothered you a little bit. So I like to be able to help kids name it because it really does make a huge difference. And then the last thing I like to really focus on for kids is, where do they feel it in their bodies? Because that is a great indicator for them. You feel it in your body before you realize it in your mind. So if you can start to realize that you are feeling anxious because of the way that your body is feeling, then you can intervene sooner. So my college kid, I've actually seen her for a really, really long time, like probably since 6th grade, pretty sure. So she talks about her anxiety, actually, and she talks about where she feels her anxiety in her body, and it's all like she calls it sting, because she has anxiety and she's had it since she was little. So she called it sting when she was like 2 or 3, because it feels like pins and needles on her arms. And so she will sometimes text me like, I'm having some sting today, because that's our code. Like, I know that you are feeling anxious about your job interview, so let's talk about it. So being able to label those things where they feel it in their bodies can give them that signal like, oh gosh, something is happening, and then this is what that feeling feels like, and I know I need to do something. And it sounds really simple to say it like that, right? It can take time for kids to do that. It takes time for us. Do you know how long it took me to realize stress versus anxiety in my body? And then I finally figured it out, and I was like, oh, that's like life-changing. So I understand when I'm feeling stressed versus when I'm feeling anxious, and I do something different depending on the feeling. So I love to be able to do that with them and like actually like color it in, and they like pick a color that they want to represent the feeling, and then they just color it in where they feel it. Or for my older kids, my teenagers, I don't use this like cute Harry Potter looking guy. I just actually talk with them and I write it down. Like, I feel this I feel hot in my head. My arms feel wiggly. My legs feel like I want to run, or whatever it is, however they want to say it. And they have like very unique ways of like describing their bodies. And I go with it because it's their language, and it makes them, it's easier for them to like, they feel heard when you reflect back their language. But it's really cool when they are able to use that knowledge and know, oh, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, I need to do this thing. So be hopeful. And this is one of the things that I wanted to share before we go into step 2. So there's been some research on positive childhood experiences. So there's been a lot of talk about adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. I'm sure that probably has come up before and around here. But one of the things that I love, I'm always looking for, tell me the things that are working. Tell me the things that are good. Tell me the things that I can do to help combat it. And so there's this great study, and it's cited down below, where they talk about positive childhood experiences, things that mitigate those negative, adverse childhood experiences that happen. And it was amazing to read because they're shockingly simple. Shocking. Talking about feelings with your family. Done. That is a protective factor. Feeling like your family is supportive of you in difficult times. That's a protective factor. Being able to feel safe and protected at home by an adult. That's a protective factor. By doing those things, which you're all doing, you are being protective. That's a protective factor for them. And it's dose dependent. So the more they have, the better it is. And the better their mental health outcomes are as adults. The more they're likely they will seek treatment when they need it. The better off they are, and just in terms of their mental health. So it's really neat to see that these are things that we can do. And I always love, as the therapist who comes into a home, at having at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care. So if you had like a Mrs. O'Neill like I had in 4th and 5th grade, and you have a counselor who cares about you, that's awesome. That's another protective factor for you. So I love being able to share this study with people so that you know the things that you're doing in your home just by being you and raising your families, you're being a protective childhood experience for your children. Feel good? All right. So next, we're going to dig into trying a coping skill. So we've talked about identifying and labeling the feeling and some ideas for that. And now we're going to actually dig into coping skills. So here we go. So how would you define a coping skill? Just out of curiosity, how would you define it? Anybody want to give it a guess? Because I say it all the time. What do you think? Good. Yeah. So something that helps you feel better when you're not feeling at your best. I like that. Anybody else want to? I love that. Yes.
Something that distracts you from what's bothering you?
Yes, absolutely. Something that distracts you. From what's bothering you. This is why I wear flats when I do these talks, because I didn't a couple of times and I definitely bit it. So, but you know what? I went with it because it's what you do, right? I'm like, oh gosh, that was. I know. I kicked off the shoes, and I was like, never mind. I'm walking around this, and it's not, don't get upset at me. I'm just going to take off my shoes, because you don't want that to happen again. So it's strategies we use to deal with big feelings, overwhelming thoughts, and challenging situations. Now, I always like to find coping skills that are healthy and safe, because truly, you can cope in ways that are not helpful. You can cope in ways that are not safe. And it is a coping skill. Like that is, if that's what's working for you, if you are in a particular kind of environment, if you are just struggling mentally with a lot of different things that are happening, like there are kids tried coping skills. Adults have coping skills that are not safe and healthy. So what I want to do is try and help kids find those ones that are safe, healthy, going to keep themselves safe, keep other people safe, keep the property safe. And the thing that I always like to mention about coping skills is that it varies child to child. It's like they have different learning styles, they have different coping styles. It varies from environment. What works when you're on the bus may not work when you're in school, may not work when you're hanging out with your friends or on the soccer field or at the sidelines of your brother's basketball game, right? It all depends on the environment. And it also depends on your feelings. So just like I mentioned earlier, my strategies when I am anxious are different than my strategies when I am stressed. And it just depends on the feeling. So what works when you're mad might not work when you're sad, and that might be something different than when you're frustrated. So I like to talk about these 5 different types of, or styles of coping. So the books are divided into 4, it's because I put movement and sensory together. Although my best friend is an OT, and so we talked for a long time, and it was pretty organic, and I decided, you know what, there's a lot more sensory processing stuff happening, and I'd like to really divide that out, because I think for those kids who are having sensory processing disorder, they need something a little bit different than just like a regular movement. But in the books, they're sort of combined. So just in case you were looking at that. So when I look at this, I think about trying to have kids have a couple of strategies from one or two, from each of these coping styles, so that they can manage wherever they are, so that they can cope with whatever feeling that they are having, so that they can manage when they're in different places. So I am going to go through each of these and actually talk about some strategies in each of them, and really give you a little bit more information about what is the difference between sensory and movement. We'll talk about it in a little bit as we go. But before we dive in, one thing I always want to mention is that we should practice when they're calm. Like the rainbow we saw earlier, if they're in those rain clouds, there's no learning happening. That's not a learning time. We want them to be in the rainbow so we can talk with them. And I like using transition points. So I will talk with them and do something before or after school. Now, my kids get up at the crack of dawn as middle schoolers and high schoolers. So when I think about before school, I think about those elementary school kids who are up, because my son was one of those. We would take walks in the morning. That's how early he was up before elementary school. But for like teenagers, that's not gonna work. Like they are barely mine at least are like barely making it to the bus. Like I will see you after school. We will talk about it then. During transitions in the afternoon activities. So if they come off the bus and they have a snack and then there's a little bit of a break before it's time to get started on homework, that's a great time. Or that I know that hour before dinner is rough. So if there are two people at home, it might be a time where you could have one person do something and the other person focusing on making dinner, but that doesn't always work. So sometimes after dinner is a great choice. Everybody's already sitting there, and so you can have the conversation. And a lot of magic happens at bedtime. That is when they talk to you, when the lights are out and they are laying down and their minds are a little bit like less cluttered with all the things that they had to do during the day. And that's when they start talking. And that's when they start sharing about stuff that's going on. And that's a great time to try some relaxation skills. So I would encourage you to practice when you before they need them, when they're calm, when you're calm, in times that work for your family, in the rhythm of your day. And I always like to try like maybe one new skill a week if you're trying to build somebody's strategies. It doesn't need to be like every day, it's like we've got to do it at 6:15 every day. Y'all know that isn't going to happen. So what I want you to do is try and figure out when it will work for you. So let's talk about relaxation. So these are skills designed to help you calm down. The things that I put in relaxation are things like deep breathing techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, so when you're squeezing and releasing your muscles throughout your body, mindfulness activities I like to put into relaxation, and definitely a lot of deep breathing. I always start with deep breathing with kids because it is powerful. The way I explain it to my teens, actually, is like a body hack. So when your body gets into fight, flight, or freeze, your pupil, like your muscles tense up, everything tenses, your digestion slows down. So sometimes when kids are like anxious and they talk about their stomach hurting, it's true. Like their stomach probably is hurting a little bit because their digestion is slowing down and it feels kind of funny. But their breathing gets shallow. And so in order to get their breathing back to a normal kind of rate, I like to tell kids and teens to take slow breaths and do breathing in a way that is going to work for you. So let's see. One thing I like to do is talk about balloon breathing and share it. To have them think about their belly like a balloon, because I want them to take deep belly breaths. So you don't want them to take breaths from their chest. You want them to take breaths from their belly. So I want them to pretend their belly is a balloon and expand it and breathe in and make the balloon bigger, and contract it and make the balloon smaller. So that helps them be able to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze. And it does take a little bit of time. It's not like instantaneous. That's the other thing. Kids are always like, it's not working. Like, you've done like 2. So let's give it a moment. Let's give it a beat and see if there's something else that you can do. And just give it a little bit more time to see if it makes a difference. But to really pretend like their belly is a balloon, breathe in and then breathe out, and to slow it down. One thing I like to do for younger kids, and I just did this with one of my clients, deep breathing with your hand. So you can try this. You can put your hand out in front of you, and you trace your thumb and breathe in, and then trace the other side of your thumb and breathe out, and then trace your index finger in and out, next finger in and out, and then your next finger in and out, and then your pinky. And what I did with this family, because she's like kind of a cuddly kid, she likes cuddles, right? So I had the mom put her hand out, and the daughter traced the mom's hand, and they did their breathing together. And I love that because things were starting to go off the rails, y'all. And it was like getting close to dinner. Like I'm about to like peace out and things are starting to heat up. So I'm like, let's pause and let's do this together. So it's a way for both the adult and the child to take a deep breath together. And, you know, they're taking those 5 deep breaths. It can really shift things. It can shift the energy when you're doing something like that. So I love the connectedness that can happen when they're holding their hand out and you're tracing, or the other way around. And I actually, so when kids get older, they don't like to have coping skills that other people can see, especially at school. So I will tell my older kids, you can put your hand on your lap, or you can put your hand on your desk, and you can trace, and nobody knows what you're doing. They're just like, oh, they're not paying attention. That's fine. They're just taking deep breaths. So it can be something that older kids can use too, in a pretty chill way, where it's not like, they're not doing like a volcano breath where they're jumping up and down and doing something that brings a little bit more attention, but a neat way to take some breaths. Something else I like to do is use visualization when I can. So smelling the cocoa and cooling the cocoa. So they're just imagining that there's like a little cup of hot cocoa. And I really go there with them. I'm like, we are going to sit, like, imagine the marshmallows, y'all. It's going to taste so good. And so we do that. I also will sometimes do like smell the soup, cool the soup, just to get them to slow their breathing and be able to get, hopefully, into a calmer space. And then, is this going to go? Yep, there it is. All right. And so for my teenagers, I use deep breathing with a GIF. I'll tell you why. Because I can text it to them, and they can look at their phone, and nobody knows what they're doing. I actually had a client, she was on a road trip with her parents to Virginia, and I had shown her this beforehand. And she's like, I really, and she was like stressed beyond belief. They were like talking to her, like, you have your kids in the car and it's like captive audience, right? And so they started talking to her about college, and her little sister was there, and it was like really super awkward. So she texts me and she's like, Janine, can you send me that deep breathing GIF, please? And can you text my mother and tell her to stop talking about college to me right now? I did it kindly. It was like, you don't want this conversation right now. Trust me. She's not going to listen to you. So those are some ideas for deep breathing. I love talking about deep breathing, and because it is like that first line of defense that I like to use with kids. So that's why I spend a little bit of time on it, because it is so powerful. But other things that you can do in terms of the relaxation part of the toolbox, the coping style, is imagining your favorite place. Oh my goodness. I loved doing this. I used to do a coping skills unit with my 5th graders as they were going up into the big bad middle school. And everybody was super stressed out. And it was one of those like super high performing, wealthy districts. And, you know, it was really hard. Like these kids are talking about Harvard and kindergarten. I'm like, slow your roll. Like we don't have to go there. Let's just enjoy childhood, y'all. But imagining your favorite place, I loved being able to do this with them because it was something that they could use in the school. All it requires is your imagination. That's all you need. So you can use it wherever you are. So I have them imagine their favorite place, their calm place. And I ask them, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? Is it hot or cold? Are there things that you would normally eat there? Things that you really enjoy there? I really want them to get into a sense memory of it so that it can be something that they call on, and it's like taking a little mini mental vacation for them. I love for kids to be able to do that. And when they go on vacation, I tell them, if there is a moment that you are just having the best time and you are just loving everything about this vacation, take a memory, make a memory right there, pause, and think about, how does it feel? What do I see? What do I smell? What do I hear? Am I tasting something amazing? What are the things that are happening? And then take a picture. If you don't have a phone because you're too little, or if you're a teenager, you can take your own picture. But then you have that, and it's something that you can call back on later on. That's what you can do. If you are sitting down and you're about to take a test and you're starting to get overwhelmed and frustrated, then you can stop and use this imagine your favorite place. Go on that vacation so that you will be okay. So that's what I love, being able to help kids do that. And again, an invisible coping skill they can use wherever they go. They don't have to have any special materials. They can just do that. The next section is distracting kids. Somebody mentioned that earlier, distraction. And I will say, sometimes people get on me about this. And I will say, I'm not trying to help them like ignore their problem or suppress it or deny it. But we have those kids who get stuck on a loop. And sometimes their brains need a break. And sometimes they just need to get a chance to just relax for a little bit, just to chill out, just to, they've tried all the things, or sometimes it's problems outside of their control. And so that you've done everything you can do, but you want to try and get them off of that perseveration. So that's when distraction can be super helpful. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually really amazing. I love that play is a natural stress reliever for kids, open-ended play, where they are choosing what they are playing with. They are doing, they're getting into that state of flow, doing what they want to be doing. It can be such a natural stress reliever. So ideas that I like to suggest. I love when kids can make something with their hands. I love it. If they can make art, if they can do something with Legos, if they can paint, if they can draw, if they can crochet, if they can knit, all those things, to just make something with your hands. And you don't have to be good at it, okay? I am the worst artist. I am so bad, y'all. But I know that about myself. And it's not something that I'm like I don't want to necessarily change it. I'm cool with it. I've got other strengths. But I know I'd love to doodle. So I make doodles, and every single kid has seen me doodle, because that's what I do when I sit in therapy with them, is I doodle and they talk, and it works. And it's relaxing, and it is distracting. And then also, using, like, you're building things. If you're using Legos, if you're using blocks, if you're using Duplos, if you're using Connects, lots of cool woodworking, lots of cool things that kids can do to give their brains a break. I love for kids to be able to do that. And also, my kids were super into like Kiwi crates, Eureka crates. They loved that. It was such a break, and we did a lot of those during COVID, I'm not gonna lie. Like we had a lot of time on our hands in our house, so we did a lot of Eureka crates. We had so many. Something else that I like to have kids, oh yes, Eureka Crate? Oh, so Kiwi Crate, it's a company, it's actually, I think they were in San Francisco. And so they have these crates that kids will make different things. So I'm trying to think. For Eureka Crate, they're for like older kids. So Elisa made a ukulele, and she made like a marble run. But younger kids, they have like an art one. It's lots of different like cute, well-made, well-designed crates that they can use, and it gives them an instruction booklet, so they can go through it by themselves. Like my son would actually go through it by himself. Their customer service was also great, because there were a couple times like they didn't have the things that they needed, and I just emailed them and they were like, it's on its way, and they'd come back out and they would be able to finish it. So I totally love reading, and I encourage my kids to read. I encourage my clients to read. It is a coping skill. It can be useful. You can disappear in a book, and it can be lovely to leave the world and disappear into a different one when you're reading. So I encourage reading all the time. And then playing games, board games. Oh my goodness, I am a board game fanatic. I love them. And there's lots of different things that you can do. And one of our family favorites, oh gosh, we loved What Do You Meme? What Do You Meme Family? And what's the other one we just, Cards Against Humanity? But the family, not the, but the kid one. That was really fun. We played that on vacation for like an entire night. And to say, they were teenagers. They played with us the entire night. I was like, what? Are you sure you don't want to go upstairs? Oh, all right, we'll play another round. So lots of fun stuff. And then, you know, Uno and lots of different things that you can do with kids. And then, so let's talk about sensory. So sensory, I think about using your senses. So using your sense of taste, your sense of touch, and also like where you are in space, like how your body is positioned, and, you know, doing some different things that can help kids be able to cope using their senses. So I have to say, listening to music, I have been finding this more and more and more with kids. It is so powerful. I had a little girl who was getting frustrated, and she was frustrated before I came in the house. So, you know, that's what sometimes happens. I come over, and she knows I'm coming over. But she was getting frustrated. So I go up, and I see where she is, and she has her headset on, and she's like just jumping. She's just jumping to this music. And I can't... Oh, it was the Bad Guys movie, which I did not know existed because my kids are too old now. But she was like, I love this song. It makes me so happy, and it helps me when I'm feeling frustrated. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And so you celebrate those times where they find something that's going to work for them. So we totally listen to music. I listen to all sorts of stuff. I'm open to lots and lots of different kinds of music. Susu actually took us to Red Rocks today. Holy cow. The variety of artists that are there, that have played there, is amazing. But listening to music, calming sounds, you know, and it's something that teachers actually do. Like they will set up, have calm music when kids come in. They will have, like, for those longer high school blocks, there's like 90-minute blocks. I don't know if that's here, that happens here, but that happens in my district. It does here. So teachers will sometimes do like a music break in the middle, just as a transition piece, and they get to pick. And the teachers find the clean versions, but they play the music. It can be such a great way to help kids reset in the middle of a day. So I very much encourage listening to music, listening to calming sounds. I think it's phenomenal. And then I also like fidgets, and I had to pack light, but usually I bring fidgets. So I didn't bring any fidgets today, but I'm using this image. Sometimes, you know, if kids are sitting down and they're like struggling with their homework, sometimes they just need something to hold, something to play with. And I try not to think of it as a toy. It's more like a tool to help them focus, help them concentrate, help them be able to stay on task, get some of that like energy out in a way where they can still do stuff, still get their work done, but they're getting a little bit of movement. There was one time I spoke, and this woman came in, and she sat down at her desk, and she lined up, like, no lie, 20 fidgets in front of her. And like an adult. And I was like, you came here and you were like, we're talking about coping skills. I'm going to bring my fidgets. And I was like, this is great. And we found a new fidget that I didn't know about. So I'm always open to learning about new fidgets, finding fidgets, figuring out what works. So a lot of times people will talk about stress balls, right? Stress balls, as a former school counselor, turn into balls, right? Like a football becomes a football. Soccer ball becomes a soccer ball. Like that's what they're doing with them. So I try to find things that aren't so like ball shaped all the time, because it really becomes like a toy, and then that's not useful anymore. Then it's not helpful for them. So I love using fidgets for that, like a little nervous energy, a little bit of wiggliness, right? And then movement. So a lot of times when kids get like frustrated, angry, really big feelings, sometimes it can come out like you get a lot of extra energy in your body, right? Like it's just in there. When some kids have really big feelings, one of our kids has really big feelings. He feels everything big. And, you know, he feels mad big, but he also feels happy big. So there's that bonus. But it's a way, we want to try and help them find ways to safely get that big feeling out of their bodies. So I think about doing like small body movements sometimes, like squeezing Play-Doh or squeezing Theraputty or squeezing, like just lots of different textures. Slime is still a thing sometimes in some of the households I go to, not all of them, but they like to play with slime. But trying to do those like smaller body movements and then other bigger body movements. So like doing something like wall push-ups. So it's what it sounds like, push-ups against the wall. So you're not having to get down on the ground, but it's a way to get some of the energy out in a controlled way, in a way that has boundaries, in a way that has some structure to it. Same with jumping jacks, same with head, shoulders, knees, and toes. My son actually would do wall push-ups in between homework when he was younger. All the time. All the time. He would do his wall push-ups in between his homework breaks. So that was really fun. And then another thing that I like to just mention for stretches and yoga, so like another kind of movement that you can do. These are two resources that I absolutely love for movement and stretches in yoga. So Go Noodle, how many of you have heard of Go Noodle? So some of you have. So Go Noodle, for those of you who don't know, it's a website that you can go to. They also have some of their videos on YouTube, so you can actually access it there. And they have a family version and they have a school version. So your kids may have actually done some Go Noodle at school. So they have indoor recess. When we had 100 inches of snow, we did a lot of indoor recess with Go Noodle when my kids were younger. They have like handshakes you can do, but the videos are really short and very approachable. And they also have like a whole flow, they call it a flow section. So they do stretches and yoga and breathing and different things. So lots of different ways to get your body to move using Go Noodle. So I really like that resource. And then another resource I love is Little Flower Yoga. So if you are interested in doing any yoga, Jennifer Cohen Harper, a phenomenal woman. I've done some work with her in the past, and she's created this whole program called Little Flower Yoga. You can get certified in it, but she also has some cards, and that's what we used. I'll use them during therapy with kids if we want to create like a quick yoga flow or a quick stretch flow. Used them with my own son during COVID. And it was really great because on the back of the cards, it actually explains what the purpose of the movement is and what it can do. So you can really pick something that's going to work for the kid for the child in front of you. So it's really neat. I love those two resources. I'm keeping my eye on the time. Okay, and processing. So this is the strategy that is really, it's all about identifying the feelings, which we've already talked about, identifying where you feel things in your body, being able to figure out what the triggers are for you, what are the things that are tough for you, what are the things that are hard, and then make a plan. That's really where this comes into play. Like you want to be able to help them identify those feelings, which is that first step we talked about, and make a plan for the next time. So one of the things that I really like to talk about with kids, especially my teenagers, is their inner dialogue. When kids are getting down on themselves, when kids are getting frustrated because things aren't working well or going well, I sometimes will say, and this shows my age, I'm like, change the tape. Change the playlist. So you want to change your inner dialogue. You want to help them come up with some strategies. You can talk about like what are those negative self-talk sentences that are coming up in their head, like what's going on, to stop and think about it and figure out what are those things that are like really weighing me down, and let's come up with some ways that we can change that. And the use of the word yet, a lot of the work around growth mindset, I can't do this yet, is huge and powerful. And to be able to know, like, you have to be kinder to yourself. You have to give yourself grace. And there was a study around using your name in the third person, making it more effective. Isn't that interesting? So you talk to yourself as a third person, like, Janine, you can do this. It's all good. And then one of the things I like to point out to kids, I want you to talk to yourself like you would talk to somebody you love. Would you talk to your friend the way that you're talking to yourself right now? Would you let somebody talk to your friend the way that you're talking to yourself right now? Absolutely not. So I know that's like, I only had an hour, right? So I didn't, there's so many different strategies that you could try and use. And I actually have some free checklists that you can get at my website where it goes through for the younger kids. If they're more visual, they can have, I think there's 30 strategies that they can use. The blue one, more for kids who are really strong readers. So I've used it for 4th grade up pretty much, and being able to help them come up with some different strategies that they can use and what's going to work for them. Because I've shared some strategies, but there may be other strategies that work for your kids, or something that you thought of when we were talking, and that can be a really powerful thing for you to be able to find things that will work for your kid and your situation, because everybody is different, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're on step 3, okay? So they've labeled it, they've tried a strategy, and now we're checking in. We're reviewing game tape, as I sometimes like to say. What happened? What went well? What didn't go well? What do we want to try differently next time? And thinking about it in a way that feels more neutral. Like, the problem is the way that is the feeling and how it is manifesting. It's not the kid. And so we're trying to tackle the problem together, because your level of frustration, your frustration is really challenging. So let's try and figure out how we can help you with your frustration, right? Versus you're not doing it well, right? We're trying to come up with ways that we can actually have them come together, and we're solving a problem together. So I like to have them practice together. I like to practice with them, and that's one of the ways that I get kids to buy in. Even my teenagers, I practice with them. I've done mindfulness with chocolate with my teenagers. They loved that. Using visuals, so when kids are in that, in those 2 clouds, it's really hard for them to hear, but they can see better. So to be able to have some visuals of the things that they can do, of those strategies that they can use, can be really super helpful. And then part of it is being prepared. There's a lot of pre-work that has to go into when you're working with kids in terms of coping skills. So you want to put in that, we're talking about what's the plan and what are we going to do the next time this happens, right? But then we have to be prepared. So if they are going to maybe try blowing bubbles for taking deep breaths, because that's the strategy that they tried and they really liked, then maybe you have bubbles in your calm space. If they want to try deep breathing with a hand, make sure that they have the visual of a hand, or even just a picture of their own hand. And you can put that on the wall. So that's just a reminder for them of what you can do when you're having those moments. And I like having a calm space in the house, and I like having a toolkit on the go. So when my kids were young, my entire bag was full of nonsense that would help them when we were at all these different places that you find yourself at with elementary school kids or middle school kids. So what are the things that we can do? A lot of distraction. So I would bring tic-tac-toe, I would bring dot-to-dot games, and having those ready to go with them, because it made sure that I knew, okay, these are strategies I know work for them, and I want to make sure I have them ready to go. And then finally, you check in and you review the plan, because it's not going to go well. Okay? It's not like we have a magic wand and we can wave it and be like, everybody learns how to cope. And it can be I always think about it. I'm like, if I had a magic wand and I can teach everybody how to cope, I'd probably go and have a hobby farm and raise mini goats. But that's not happening yet, so it's fine. So in the meantime, we're just going to keep checking in and keep reviewing the plan and review it often and continue to check in and help them learn that they are the owners of their body. They are the ones that are in charge of their emotions. They're in control. They can do these things. They can figure out what's going to work for them. And they have knowledge that we don't necessarily have about them, right? They know their bodies. They know what works. They know what feels good. They have they know. So let's use that, right? So I've given you some ideas, and now I want you to take that piece of paper that you got earlier, and I'm wondering if you could flip it over and come up with one strategy that you want to try with your child or teen. It doesn't have to be one I mentioned. If you thought of something else that sounds really cool, go for it. I love it. I love it. Okay. As you're doing that, I want to take a moment and make sure that you don't forget about yourself. I spend a lot of time talking about coping skills, and something that comes up all the time is, how can I do this when I can't do it myself? Right? Like, it's really hard for me to cope, so how can I teach my kids to cope? Well, one of the things that you need to be doing is being able to take care of yourself, not forgetting about yourself, making sure that you're doing things that bring you joy, that make you happy, that make you feel proud, that make you laugh. What are those things? I don't want you to forget about yourself. I want you to do those things. And I recognize that it's not always going to be able to be a spa day. Like nobody has time for that. Nobody has time for that. So I would encourage you to find I think about it in sort of 3 parts. Like, you find little things that only take 2 or 3 minutes. You find medium-sized things that maybe take a little bit longer, like a gym class or reading a book or something. And then you find those bigger, longer things, like taking a little mini vacation with your sister or whatever. So you find those things and you do those things pretty regularly, and do the tiny things often, do the bigger things less often, obviously, but you want to try and make sure that you're building that into your life, because one of the best things, one of the best compliments I've ever gotten was when somebody said that me connecting their own coping skills with teaching their kids coping skills was the most powerful thing that happened in their family. Because they were trying it and working through it, but not really actually being able to show it. You want to be the thermostat. You want to set the tone. You want to be the calm. You don't want to rise and fall with them, because you really can. It's real easy, especially teenagers. They will push you. Gosh, they will. But you want to make sure that you're being the thermostat as much as possible. So I want to encourage you to think of, what are your coping skills? And what do you do that makes you happy? And I have goofy things, y'all. I do ridiculous things. I get onto TikTok and I get onto Instagram Reels and I go down some rabbit holes. Now, they're really cute dog videos that I see, right? I get that. And I find book recommendations. I play video games, actually. I like playing video games with my kids. I like playing video games by myself. When I go to an airport, or sometimes when my husband is really kind, he'll bring home an Us Weekly. And I love that. That's the best. I love it. I watch British murder TV all the time. I watched it before I came here. So, it's just one of those things. I try to build in those things that recharge me, that relax me, that energize me. And I break out of the food and alcohol habit just because I want you to expand your ways to cope. I lived in Sonoma County for a year. I love wine, and I travel for wine, and I talk about wine all the time. I am not opposed to a glass of wine. I also love food. I made a lot of Nutella croissants when it was COVID, a lot. But I also wanted my kids to see that I would take breaks and go for walks. And I would go to the gym, or I would go to a Zumba class, or I would do something with my friends, or I'd go away with my sister. So you want to make sure that you're finding out what your strategies are, what your coping skills are, what can you do. Whoops. So I want to encourage you to think of one thing that you will do to take care of yourself over the next week. You can feel free to write it on that piece of paper if you want to as well. Oh, and then it's 8:21. Look at that. I have time for questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope that was helpful. I hope you got some ideas. I hope you got sparked. And I hope you take care of yourselves. So I have time for, thank you. I have a few moments for questions. So if anybody wants to ask me anything, I'm open to doing that. Yes. I would want to talk about oh yeah, sorry.
What would you suggest to help kids take responsibility in situations where they believe everything is everyone else's fault?
I would actually do an activity called what I can control versus what I can't control. So where do I have power? Where do I have agency? Where do I have say? When you can't control the weather, you can't control a microburst of rain, right? You can't control whether your teacher gives you a pop quiz. You can't control if your parents get divorced. Those are things you cannot control. What do you have control over? You have control over your actions. You have control over your behaviors. You have control over yourself. So if there's a teacher who gives pop quizzes, what do? You study and you try and you figure out what are the things that you can do. Where do you have control in that situation? What are the things I can do? You can't control whether your plane is late. You can control how you react to it, right? So it's always interesting to be at the airport and watch people when planes are late. There you get a lot of interesting information about who can cope and who cannot. I'm like, what are you doing? We can't leave. They just said that. There's nothing we can do right now. So you can be mad about it for the next hour, or you can go and have a piece of chocolate. Maybe you get a book. Maybe you play a video game. What are you doing? You're just making me upset. And then I control myself and walk away. I walk away from that person. I'm I'm not sitting next to you anymore. I cannot do this. I cannot do this. Anybody else? Yes.
When you talk about your plan, stage 3 is the debrief.
Yes.
Is there a duration that you want to hit that with? I ask because we have been in fight or flight for over a week now, and there is no debrief in my mind that we can be having at the moment.
Okay, so debrief is it's just not there. I would say, I wonder about, are there other, it doesn't have to be a verbal debrief. So you could actually write. Would they write? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you write to them, and you write it in a journal, and you stick it under their pillow, and then you have them write back to you, encourage them to write back to you. So that way it's not, sometimes the verbal, I should have said this, the verbal debrief can be a little too intense, right? It can sometimes set things off again, because you're sitting there and you're having a conversation. So other ways you can do it are having it be through written. So sometimes I text. I will text, or I will send a meme to open the gates of having a conversation. Look at this cute dog video. Isn't he adorable? Or aren't they silly? You know what I mean? To start the conversation. And it's okay if it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes debriefs don't go well and don't go anywhere. And it might last a second. They're I just don't want to talk about it. You know where they live. You will come back to it. So you can always revisit something later. If this is a problem, it's going to continue to be a problem, so you have other opportunities to have those teachable moments. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. You're welcome. Anybody else? I think we might be all set. Susu, shall I give you the mic again?
Well, I got a bunch of notes that I took. I bet y'all did too. What was your one most interesting takeaway that you think you're ooh, I think I might want to try that one? So, does anybody want to shout it out?
Label the feelings.
Say it out loud. Label the feelings. Name it to tame it.
Practice, practice, practice.
Absolutely. I just read a quote from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they're punched in the mouth. So practice, practice, practice. Oh. Capture the memory. Yeah. With all the sensory pieces of what it, and that's great for us and for our kids for the good part. You know, the coping skills are for those adverse things, but when they can pull back and recall some of these awesome experiences that they've had, then they can bring themselves to a calmer jumping off place and know that it's going to be okay. You're training yourself to start looking. Yeah, to notice it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, being in the moment.
Where do I feel these feelings in my body? I hadn't thought about that before, you know. Yeah, when I get this feeling, I feel this. And having them talk about that and identifying that, I think, could be very powerful.
Yeah, and it will change over time. So, like, at the beginning, they might not say as much. And my girl with the sting, like, when she... Oh, sorry. It'll change over time. And my girl with the sting, like, she, you know, she's in college now, so she can tell me a lot more about what's going on with her body than she could when she was, like, in 6th grade, right? So it can change over time. And that's really, it's a beautiful thing, because then they grow and mature and learn more about themselves, and they can, and she uses that. So she's like, I know that I have this really big, like, I'm worried about this whole thing with work, so can you just help me talk through what I'm going to do? Absolutely. Let's talk through some strategies you can use. Let's do it. You got it. So it's fun. I like it. Excellent. Thank you. You guys have been great.
All righty. Well, we're going to be, if you have anyone that you want to tell for tomorrow, we'll be on at 9:15 on the other side of the building because there was a power surge here. And that's why we're back to a different way of projecting today. So we'll be entering from the far east side, door 8, tomorrow. So if anybody wants to come, feel free to send text and emails to your friends, give them a quick call and say, you got to come. This will not only help your kids, but it will help you personally as a human being and also you as a mom or dad with your kids. So thank you so much. Feel free. Janine will be back here if you want to peruse her books and she can sign them. You can have all of this information at your fingertips. There's some other little things to grab on your way out. And feel free to pick up a snack and enjoy it on your way home. Thank you.